This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the next 60 minutes, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. But let's start with a quick run through the markets here for you. So we're going to be focusing a little bit on retail perspectives from the JSE. Apparently, you guys don't really like retail stocks. So let's look at Pick n Pay, for instance, down about 2% so far in the year. Massmart, however, down by over 50%. And we're focusing on those in comparison to Choppies, which we'll talk about a little later on in the hour. Granted, the dividend yield there isn't particularly spectacular. 3.5% is the highest you've seen there. But what is it about retail that's not resonating with the market? We'll explore that and plenty more, including this. Ghana's year of return is generating $1.9 billion of revenue for its economy. We'll look at the UK's trade negotiations as it prepares to leave the European Union. And Tunisia launches its first ever scooter service in the capital. Quite a diverse program for you tonight. Let's start global business in Ghana, where the West African oil producer says that a total of $1.9 billion has been generated within the economy through activities related to the year of return. The country's Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture says that program has also brought about an increase of over 200,000 tourists into the country. Barbara Otengassi also added that a further 200 people of African diaspora have been granted citizenship by the head of state. Land has also been offered to encourage many more to return to the motherland. So what's the year of return? Essentially, it's a year-long event that celebrates the return of the descendants of the first enslaved Africans from Jamestown in Accra to Jamestown in Virginia in the United States of America. Now, after only 21 months since its inauguration in March 2018, Egypt's new Al Alamein city is shaping up. Built on some 50,000 acres of land, its skyscrapers can already be seen from miles away, and it could very well be Egypt's second capital. Here's CGTN's Adel El Marouki with the details.
About 100 kilometers away from Alexandria, a new Egyptian city is under construction on the Mediterranean Sea. With exclusive construction licenses for high-rises in the entire north coast, New Al Alamein has already become a construction icon. Work here continues 24/7. Construction speed is quite phenomenal.
The rate of our progress has exceeded the expectations. We are trying to boost touristic activities here in this city. We are definitely in competition with many Mediterranean cities. We are also trying to decrease the population density in Alexandria. The first stage is planned to accommodate 1 million citizens.
When fully finished, New Al Alamein should be home for some 3 million residents. The Egyptian government says it's allocating some $60 billion for this mega city. It has already awarded construction contracts exceeding $14 billion. The city should be filled with life soon. The first phase's deadline is June next year.
We are trying to make it a winter attraction like any other city. It's why we have already opened the Arab Academy for Naval Sciences, which now has 3 operating schools, and it will grow to 12. Then an international university will provide 14 different majors. We will have many students. Soon the industrial areas will operate. That will make it a year-round city.
A total of 24 skyscrapers are under construction, including a 6 towers roof-connected hotel with an infinity pool on top. The city is designed to appeal to all tastes. While it's expected to attract a great deal of investments, officials say they're being picky in selecting investors.
To make this a world-class city, we are very selective when it comes to investors. We look at the portfolios and see if they are up to the standard we want for New Al Alamein. For starters, we are focusing on investors interested in education, healthcare and tourism.
Built right next to the historic tombs of Al Alamein, the new city will have more than 15,000 hotel rooms available for its visitors. Egypt is hoping that Al Alamein's location as the site for one of the main battles in Africa during World War II would help it attract more foreigners to this part of Egypt. It's already known to Egyptians for its golden sandy beaches. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, New Alamein, Egypt.
And we're still in Egypt. The government there has announced a $6.5 billion fund designed to support the country's local industry. The idea is to essentially get plants and factories affected by Egypt's political upheaval since 2010 to get back on their feet. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
There are about 5,200 closed factories because of debts. The government is helping these factories to reopen.
It's a three-part initiative by the government and central bank. The first is to fund SMEs in the manufacturing sector. The second is to cancel debts and debt services on closed factories as long as they reopen and resume production. The third is about real estate and land for the factories.
This is an initiative by the government to focus on industrialization. Scores of factories and plants have stopped production due to the political and economic stabilities of the last decade. Amr Fattouh owns a polyplast factory that has managed to survive the recession, but he says it wasn't easy.
There were many problems facing businesses. It started with the two uprising and their fallout, then the burdens of economic reforms, also the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. It was tough at the beginning. There was no vision or plan for industries. Things are better now, but we must offer more facilities. Why should a businessman pay huge tariffs on purchasing equipment for his factory? He should be encouraged to import materials for production. The bureaucracy is a stumbling block too. It must be abolished so the producer and the state can benefit.
The government has allocated $6.5 billion for this plan.
Imagine 5,000 products that you can produce instead of importing. We have to support these companies. We should also protect the ones that are already operating to ensure they are sustaining any difficulties. This will encourage other foreign businessmen to invest in the country.
This week, the central bank has shelled out $2 billion to pay off debts and interests on over 5,000 factories. There's about another $6 billion to support the private sector in establishing new industries as well. The target is to establish over 5,000 industrial institutions in the next year. More production means more revenue, more exports, and more job opportunities. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
All right, then a quick run through some company headlines. Royal Dutch Shell has put pen to paper on a $10 billion revolving credit facility. It replaces the oil and gas major's existing $8.84 billion facility of a similar nature. Interest and fees paid on it is going to be linked to Shell's progress towards reaching its short-term net carbon footprint intensity target. Elsewhere, Gabonese airlines have been removed from the European Union's air safety blacklist after 11 years. Gabon was withdrawn from the list following its improvements in aviation safety. The EU air safety list seeks to ensure the highest level of air safety for European and other passengers travelling through the 27-member bloc. Speaking of aviation, the US plane maker Boeing is considering whether or not to cut or just halt altogether production of its grounded 737 MAX aircraft. That comes after the Federal Aviation Administration said just last week it would not approve the plane's return to service before 2020. Company shares were down by as much as 3% in pre-market trading in New York on Monday, adding to a 19% decline since a March crash in Ethiopia. And finally, Daimler's main China joint venture partner, the BAIC Group, is considering doubling its stake in a company. That's according to reports. BAIC is currently Daimler's third largest shareholder, but if it does get to its target of getting a 10% stake, it will surpass its Chinese rival Geely, which at the moment owns about 9.7% of the German luxury car maker. That's a run through your headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Egypt's new city shaping up for completion next year. And Tunisia's new private airline, Jasmine Airways, secures its air operator's certificate.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Over in East Africa, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is expected to launch the country's fourth inland depot in the next 24 hours. It's designed to ease congestion at the container port of Mombasa. However, it's being built 100 kilometers from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, the town of Naivasha. The depot is designed to handle roughly 2 million tons of cargo every year. With this report, here's CGTN's Robert Nagila.
The final touches. Mason Bonvenjam Kanze drills through a wall in preparation for plastering. He's among hundreds of workers that have been part of the construction effort of the Naivasha Inland Depot outside the capital, Nairobi.
This work has helped my life a lot. My children are in school, and back home, I have a few projects helping my parents.
The 45,000 square meter depot has a loading capacity of 2 million tons annually. It consists of a container depot, railway marshalling yard, logistics zone, and a public utility area. It becomes the fourth inland depot after container depots in Nairobi and the towns of Kisumu and Eldoret. The depots are linked to the Mombasa Port Container Terminal by the Standard Gauge Railway. Built by Chinese firm China Rod and Bridge Corporation, the depot is an integral part of the Naivasha Special Economic Zone and will act as a place for customs clearance and conversion, reducing congestion at the port of Mombasa. Close to 1,000 locals have been trained in different areas for the project.
We have carpenters, steel fixers, masons, They are well trained by the Chinese. So they have now that ability, capability to work. And that is why the work done here went very fast because of the high-skilled labor.
Early this year, President Uhuru Kenyatta awarded both Uganda and South Sudan free land in the area to build go-downs to ease movement of goods at the dry port. The depot is expected to increase freight transportation of cargo, further cementing Kenya's leadership role as East Africa's logistics hub. For Benvenja Mkanzi, the completion of the project is not the end but the beginning of a new chapter.
When I live here, I am confident I will get other work because I am experienced.
Robert Nagila, CGTN, Naivasha, Kenya.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has announced a trading surplus of about $14 million for the month of August this year. That's 22% higher compared to the $12 million or so it recorded in the month of July. With the details, here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza.
Nigeria's Oil Corporation, in its latest financial and operations report released on Monday, said it accrued $14.2 million more in trade compared to an $11.4 million surplus it posted in the month of July. A summary of NNPC's report for the month under review showed that its revenue increased with about $105 million when compared to the previous month. Although global oil price was more in July at approximately $64 per barrel when compared to the month of August at $59 per barrel, analysts say factors like a reduction in expenses by the corporation may be behind the surplus.
During that period, NNPC although increased expenditure, but not as much. The rate of increase was not as much as what it was in the previous month, on one hand. Two, there seems to be more sales and global oil prices. It still tells us that global oil prices, to a large extent, influences what we get as revenue as a country.
The NNPC stated that $644 million was made on the sale of oil products in August compared to about 591 million sales in July. However, experts say Nigeria may need to do more to boost profits from NNPC in order to meet up with its revenue demand needed to cater for nearly 200 million citizens.
5 billion is just a small proportion compared to what government needs. So for me, and we have recommended over the time that government interest in NNPC may need to reduce and bring private interest in NNPC while NNPC stay with regulatory role for government to actually make more money.
Africa's largest economy relies mainly on proceeds from oil sales, and the government is hoping to boost its revenue from crude oil exports in order to fund its 2020 budget of about $29 billion. Experts say with the increase of global oil prices in the months after August, the oil corporation may post even more surplus, which may translate to more revenue for the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Egypt's national carrier, Egyptair, is now flying direct from Cairo to Hangzhou, adding to its existing roster of destinations in China. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has the details.
The new route has raised Egypt Air's destinations to 3 cities in China, doubling the number of flights to and from China.
Egypt Air had started with only one destination. It was to Beijing 3 times a week. Later, it launched another route to Guangzhou on a daily basis, and now a third route to Hangzhou 2 times a week, all developed within a short span of time.
China is seen as a major tourism market for Egypt. The new flight routes are part of efforts by Cairo to increase the number of visitors to the North African country.
So basically, China is one of the biggest markets for outbound tourism. So when we look at from a macro level, you will find that 174 million travelers from China per year, with an average spend of $180 million per year. So the number that Egypt has managed to get like a couple of years ago was around only 115,000 travelers, and the number that we managed to reach during this year, 2019, is actually that we doubled this amount, getting closer to 250,000 travelers from Chinese tourists.
Experts are calling for more creative efforts to attract Chinese tourists.
We need as well to start creating the Chinese products from a travel perspective that they will like. So China is mainly exporting like to say Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia. Now from our region you have from the Middle East, Dubai starting getting business from them, definitely as well Europe, London and Paris. And Egypt is a great destination for them because they like a lot the culture and heritage tours. So by creating the packages that they will like, the product that fits their criteria, widening as well the level of service and the tour guides that speak Mandarin, it will actually facilitate the process and will start attracting more tourists from China.
The new flights are not only targeting tourists. Egypt Air is facilitating travel for businessmen as well to promote bilateral trade and investments. That's Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Aviation is a bit of a theme in this part of the bulletin. We're still in North Africa, but in Tunisia this time. The country has a new private carrier. It's called Jasmine Airways. It obtained its air operator certificate. Jasmine Airways has the capacity to cater to a wide range of services, but it will mostly be focusing on short and medium-haul flights to countries across North Africa, Europe and the Middle East. Here's CGTN's Adin Chouachi with the details.
The chairman and CEO of Jasmine Airways declared that obtaining the Air Operator Certificate AOC represents the culmination of a long career in the aviation industry.
We have been working in this field since 1998 through our training schools, which have seen many generations of professionals in the aviation industry emerge from the ranks of the world's leading airline companies.
Jasmine Airways will offer crewed aircraft rental services for the Tunisian market and other markets during specific periods. The company will also operate short and medium-haul charter flights to Europe and the Maghreb.
We plan to work for Tunis Air Express for the Tunis-Jerba and Tunis-Tozer flights. Our project is to charter the aircrafts to African airlines. They will then be replaced by 2 additional Embraer 195 planes.
The company, which has created some 100 direct jobs, has chosen Enfida Hammamet Airport as the operational base for its activities, since it is located between the 2 tourist centers of Hammamet and Sousse.
Charter flights is our main activity. We'll operate in all Eastern and Western Europe. Whenever the tourist season slows down, we place our aircraft on other destinations. There's huge demand for Embraer 170 aircraft in Africa and elsewhere.
Jerba Airport will be the company's second operational base. However, it will operate at all Tunisian international airports and encourage its partners to also schedule destinations such as Tabarqa and Tozer.
Jasmine Airways plans to consolidate its fleet with new aircraft each year. The number of its employees will increase as the growth envisaged in a market where the demand for charter flights is very high, particularly in the peak period of the high season. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It's about 18:22 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Quite a bit of content coming through, including this. We'll be looking at the United Kingdom's trade negotiations agenda as it prepares to leave the European Union. And Argentina's new president has inherited a rather weak economy. What can be done to turn it around?
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
with a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. A quick run through some stories making your headlines now, starting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A landslide there at a gold mine has left at least 24 people dead. This incident happened some 40 kilometers from Watsa town in northeastern Ituri province. Local authorities there have attributed the incident to heavy torrential rains that have been hammering the area. 2 miners, however, were rescued alive. Over in Niger, leaders of the G5 Sahel group have been holding crisis talks in response to a growing terrorist threat in the region. The West African heads of state also visited the graves of Nigerian soldiers killed in a militant attack just days last week. And finally, Egypt's parliament has announced that it no longer recognizes the authority of Libya's government of national accord. According to the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, on Sunday, the GNA was hostage, he says, to terrorist groups in Tripoli. Tensions have been growing between these two neighbors, particularly after the GNA recently signed a controversial maritime border deal with Turkey. And to run through your headlines. All right, then let's shift to climate issues now. The longest United Nations climate talks on record have come to a close in the Spanish capital with a compromise deal of sorts. However, as CGTN's Guy Henderson now reports, observers, scientists and climate change activists all say the resulting agreement is a monumental failure.
All the documents being published.
After the longest UN climate talks on record, tiredness turned to confusion.
We're having all of these technical difficulties.
In the final plenary, numerous delegations struggled to find the draft documents they were being asked to finalise.
We don't know what document you're referring to.
Some even noted errors in the text that had to be corrected. With that ironed out, there was still deadlock on a central issue: rules for a carbon market seen as vital for reducing global emissions. Brazil continued to dig in its heels.
We invested a lot of energy in this regard, and find it very frustrating that at the end of the day we were not able to arrive at a final agreement.
A group of some 30 countries, including large economies like Germany and the Netherlands, formed a coalition of the willing instead, in a side deal dubbed the San Jose Principles.
The absence of rules to operationalize Article 6 does not prevent the Paris Agreement from functioning, does not prevent parties from having carbon markets, international carbon markets, and trying to relate to each other.
These weren't just the longest talks, they were also some of the most fractious. That's not to say there wasn't any progress.
All participants did at least agree to scale up their financial support for countries that are likely to be hit hardest by climate change, but no solid commitments to new funds. And there's been alarm expressed by some delegations about the United States continuing to block further progress on that front, despite the fact that they are pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords.
Consensus too that all nations must bolster their national emissions reductions plans over the next 12 months. At one stage, not even that was certain. Still, there is widespread disappointment.
President Trump and the President Bolsonaro from Brazil have undermined these negotiations here. And if they are going to continue so next year, we need a different answer from strong economies like the European Union, together with China, together with India, to come up with a new narrative of hope for the young people out there.
Next year's summit in Glasgow will be a crucial one. If it ends like this, the very credibility of the Paris Accords could be at stake.
Now, as the world's governments are meeting in Madrid to discuss the global climate emergency, thousands of kilometers away, people in Cambodia were grappling with very dramatic changes to the ecosystem in which they live. That includes the lowest water levels ever recorded in the vital Mekong River. A severely low fish catch this year could cause a major food crisis in Cambodia.
Talk to any fisherman here and you will hear similar stories. Stories of the past go like this. There was so much fish in this lake, they would jump into our boat. Or our families could survive on fishing alone. The stories we hear these days paint a different picture. One of hardship, of desperation, of depletion.
During this time, there's usually a lot of fish. Now there's none. I don't understand why. I have no food or rice because I don't grow anything. I only work as a fisherman.
Gone are the good old days. A trifecta of economic development, illegal fishing and climate change is changing the ecology of the lake, permanently weakening the pole system and wiping out fish stocks. Like a beating heart, Tonle Sap operates on a flood pole system. Its eponymous river is pushed towards the Mekong. During rainy season, when monsoons swell the Mekong, it pushes water back into Tonle Sap River and back into the lake, expanding to 5 times its dry season size, bringing with it massive amounts of sediment and rich abundance of fish. Well, that is usually the case.
Last year, fishermen had a better fish catch, but this year they only have enough to eat and not enough to sell or make money.
No country in the world relies on their lakes to the extent Cambodia does. Some 500,000 tons of fish which are caught each year feed the nation, providing the main source of protein for as much as 80% of the population. They feed Cambodia's neighbors, who import thousands of tons each year as part of a $2 billion industry. The life of the lower Mekong Basin comes out of Tonle Sap Lake, the source of 18% of the planet's freshwater fish catch.
Not safety for food security for this year, especially Cambodian people, and for export to another country too. If they don't have enough for this, next 5 years or 10 years will be no more fish product, and the livelihood will be affected to the people.
Heading into an irreversible decline, droughts are increasing, water resources are decreasing. The rich abundance of fisheries and biodiversity threatened. And so too will the livelihoods and food security of millions who have depended on this lake and the Mekong for generations. As the sun sets, Maiprun goes out to check his nets. His catch translates into stark realities. Tonle Sap is in trouble. Its people are in trouble. Along these banks, the Khmer civilization sprang, its ecosystem now facing a real threat of total collapse. Dusita Saogao, CGTN, Kampong Chhnang, Cambodia.
Now, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has welcomed 109 new Conservative MPs to Parliament today as he sets up his new cabinet. After last week's emphatic electoral victory, Johnson has a relatively large majority in the House of Commons, and he needs it in order to get approval for the exit deal he negotiated with the EU a few months ago. The primary challenge after that is negotiating a fresh trade deal with a 27-member trade bloc. Now, data today out from IHS Markit indicated that the UK's manufacturing sector has had its worst month in about 7 years. At 47.4, factory output was firmly under the 50 mark that separates contraction from expansion. And all of that's certainly going to add pressure to the trade negotiations to come in the course of 2020. Let's dive a little deeper into this subject. Alana Petrov joins us now live from London. So, Alana, given the majority, the commanding majority that the Conservatives have in the House now, does this give the Prime Minister the freedom at least to chase closer post-Brexit ties with the EU?
Based on how this election played out, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has pretty much free rein to operate as he sees fit, provided his party backs him. Now, let's remember that members of Parliament in Boris Johnson's Conservative Party, they all pledged to back his Brexit deal. So it's fair to believe that these same individuals are likely to support his other plans related to Brexit and his plans for the future relationship between the UK and European Union. As of right now, we don't know exactly what Mr. Johnson is planning. On the one hand, his Brexit deal is considered to create more of a divide between the UK and EU than what the former Prime Minister Theresa May had planned. But on the other hand, now that he's won this election so decisively, he may think it's better for business and for jobs to try to maintain a very close relationship with Europe. At this point, only time will tell what kind of strategy Boris Johnson will take. But it's fair to say that no matter what plan he pursues, the two sides will be further apart than they are right now. Now, this is a divorce, and the two sides can remain friends, can work together, can even live in the same area, in the same neighborhood. But still, they're living in different homes. That's the best way to think about this scenario.
Indeed. It did take, however, at least 5 years, I believe that was in Japan's case, to negotiate a trade treaty between Canada and Japan and the EU on the other hand. So why is it that the government down in Whitehall, why do they believe they might be able to wrap up talks by the end of 2020? That's an extraordinarily ambitious timeline.
Absolutely. Now, during the election, Prime Minister Boris Johnson put forward a number of plans that he may not be able to follow through on. This may be one of them. And so it's entirely possible that he won't be able to get a trade deal in the timeline he has planned. Approving and signing a comprehensive trade deal with the European Union in 11 months after Brexit may not be technically feasible. Some trade deals take 10 years, as you were just mentioning, but keep in mind, Boris Johnson has already won this election. And so if he wants a trade deadline extension, he can probably get it. He'll likely argue that he just needs a little bit more time to sort out the final details. Now, some pro-Brexit voters may not like that, but they can't kick him out of office. He's there for a 5-year term.
Indeed, it's going to be fun seeing what the ERG group does pull off. One last question for you, Alana. The financial services sector is a massive component of the United Kingdom's economy, and it certainly would prefer to retain access in a similar manner to what it has now with the EU. But to use your analogy earlier, yes, we're still in the same neighborhood, but we can't really be on the exact same terms, can they?
The financial services industry is not expecting this to be business as usual. We already saw many firms were taking action over the past few years, moving some operations from London into the European Union so they could keep their business going. With Brexit and outside the EU, the UK financial services industry is bound to lose some privileged access to the European market. But we just don't know how much access will be lost. We have to wait and see how these trade talks pan out. The devil will be in the detail.
Always is, isn't it? Alana Petrov, live in London. Thank you. Now, American experts and business people have hailed the latest news of an economic and trade agreement between the world's top two economies, who, as you might be aware, have been feuding for quite a while now. Just last week, the US and China announced a preliminary trade agreement. It's essentially being referred to in shorthand as Phase 1. And this deal is expected to see billions of dollars in tariffs removed or delayed.
I think it's a welcome development, the conclusion of the Phase 1 trade deal between the United States and China. It will help de-escalate the tension. It will get rid of some of the tariffs, and it will provide disciplines in a number of the important areas that have been under discussion for about 18 months.
Well, I think it's good that we have the preliminary agreement to a trade deal. This has been a very long-running dispute. It's been damaging for both economies, and it's been damaging for global economic confidence. So the indications that the sides have come to terms, I think, is helpful.
And I'm going to revisit that theme when it comes down to commodities a little later. Still, on to Latin America now. Alberto Fernandez took office as Argentina's president this week, but his vice president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, captured just as much attention. Many observers suggest Argentina could realign its foreign policy with Kirchner now that she's back in government. But as CGTN's Joel Richards now reports, the economic crisis left by the last head of state might force Argentina to proceed with caution.
On Tuesday, over 500,000 people welcomed in the new government in Argentina. Alberto Fernandez, the president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, the vice president, a return for the Peronist party.
Escuchamos decir que nosotros no volvíamos más, pero esta noche volvimos y vamos a ser mujeres mejores. En el pozo de la pobreza.
Once the euphoria died down, the work began on addressing a bleak economic outlook. In his first appearance in front of the cameras, new Economy Minister Martín Guzmán underlined the challenges facing this country, from tackling rising poverty, inflation and unemployment to perhaps its biggest challenge, paying off international creditors.
Argentina took on a lot of foreign debt, but did not use those dollars to generate productive capacity to be able to pay off that large debt, so we are in trouble.
With this shift in Argentina, Alberto Fernandez as president, the Peronists back in power, many people are wondering if this will change Argentina's international relations, and will it see Argentina draw closer to China? Argentina is among the biggest recipients in Latin America of loans from China. There is Chinese investment in major infrastructure projects, while Argentina sends a vast volume of soybeans, beef and fruit to China. Under the previous conservative government of Mauricio Macri, Argentina at first cooled its relationship with China, but then made advances in exporting agricultural goods.
The Macri administration had an ambiguous stance on China, renegotiating and reviewing contracts that had signed up until then.
Many of those contracts had been signed under the presidency of Cristina Kirchner, now back in power as vice president.
We must not lose sight of the fact that it is with the now Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner with whom the bilateral relationship with China advanced the most. The relationship has everything to gain in the sense of cooperation, and it is very important what can be built from now.
In the context of ongoing trade frictions between the United States and China, the US has pressured Latin American countries to take its side. But Argentina may aim to avoid choosing between Washington and Beijing.
If the Fernandez-Fernandez tandem tries to have different channels for different sites, this could be very interesting. If they start competing to impose one of these sides, this is going to end bad for Argentina. It's not Argentina is not in a position that they can play both sides, but they can play constructively with both sides.
Amid an economic and social crisis and fears over a debt crisis, Argentina is in no position to lose favour with any of its trade partners. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
Now, the unrest in Hong Kong since June has proven to be a blessing for Singapore, a long-time rival to the title of Asia's preeminent financial centre. Here's CGTN's Mira Liu now exploring how the city-state's gold industry in particular is gaining a massive hit from Hong Kong's escalating political turmoil.
Hong Kong and Singapore are viewed as hubs for purchasing and storing gold in the Asia-Pacific region. But the continuing unrest in Hong Kong has taken the shine of its coveted position.
But since the protests in Hong Kong, we see very few new requests for storage in Hong Kong.
We have a lot of questions on contingent plans. So clients ask how long or what's the process if they want to move their assets away from Hong Kong.
That shift has also been observed in Singapore.
What I've seen over the past year, I think since about April, is that some of our customers have indeed moved gold from Hong Kong to Singapore through a variety of means. First of which, some clients choose to sell their gold in Hong Kong and repurchase here with us. Secondly, customers might choose to ship their gold from Hong Kong to Singapore through a secured logistics provider. And then that way, it would simply mean that the existing amount of gold they have in Hong Kong would be relocated to Singapore. Thirdly, some customers just simply choose to buy more here in Singapore as a means of diversification.
Due to the global uncertainty because of the US-China trade war, Brexit, and the continued unrest in the Middle East, gold is in high demand. Over the past 12 months, gold prices have increased between 15% and 20%, and the Singapore government is keen to bolster the gold industry in the city-state. Back in 2012, the Singapore government made investment-grade gold exempt from goods and services tax, making it an attractive jurisdiction for gold investment. The latest incentive is technology. One example is Digix, a blockchain company that allows individual investors to invest in gold by purchasing a cryptocurrency that is pegged to the price of gold bullion.
Gold itself has always been known to be a very bulky item that you can't really break it down into micro pieces. What this technology allows us to do is to make these gold tokens fungible and divisible down to 0.001 gram of gold. So anyone in this part of the region with a little bit lower on the income scale could actually get access to buying micro versions of gold.
From the looks of it then, with favorable tax conditions, a stable investment environment, and tech-fueled new products, Singapore seems set to stay solidly in the gold game for some time to come. Mirulu, CGTN, Singapore.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices here for you as we move on into the next part of the program. So Brent crude is still generally positive so far in the year, essentially up 6.5% in the last 4 weeks, almost 18% so far in the year. Similar pattern that we're seeing, of course, on WTI crude. But again, it comes back to that question of trade optimism from this deal between the United States and China. It leaves most of the tariffs we've seen so far intact. So what is the fundamental basis to really be optimistic in this kind of environment with so scanty details? We'll have to find out. Here's what's coming up next. Tunisia has launched its first ever scooter service in Tunis. And we'll take you into Addis Ababa's largest art exhibition with quite a bit of local talent on display.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's head over to North Africa yet again. One startup in Tunisia is offering commuters in the capital an alternative to some pretty hard to find taxis in Tunis. It's introduced essentially the country's first scooter service in an effort to enhance the country's transportation sector. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has more on grassroots tonight.
Tunisia has launched the country's first taxi scooter service called Intigo. The move is hoped to ease traffic in the country as well as offer transport alternatives to its citizens.
We launched the taxi scooter because we saw that the biggest obstacle for the Tunisian people is transportation. No matter their social group, age or gender, Everyone has a transportation problem. So we decided to provide a solution to this urgent problem that we are facing. But this is not our final goal. Our vision goes beyond that. We want to lay the groundwork for the prosperity of the digital economy.
At least 30% lower than the price of an ordinary taxi, Intigo's taxi scooters are not only more affordable, but also easier and quicker to find on Tunisia's busy streets.
The idea is very good. It is going to facilitate the transportation of the people and passengers because we have a huge problem in public and private transportation. So the presence of this motorcycle is going to facilitate the transportation of citizens.
Passengers can order an Intigo taxi scooter using an app developed by the Tunisian startup.
The way to use Intigo is by downloading on your smartphone an app that we have developed in our office. It is very easy to use. After installing the app, the passengers just have to specify their location and destination, and a scooter will come for them. The app will tell them the exact cost.
If the company's trial run proves successful by December, Intigo plans to distribute some 50 taxi scooters in the cities of Tunis, Ariana, Benarous and Manuba. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
Now, on to Egypt. Both the government and ordinary citizens have been engaging in river cleanup campaigns. Around the world, just 10 rivers, 10 of them, contribute to 99% of the plastic pollution that ends up in our oceans. And the Nile, unfortunately, is one of them. Egypt is reported to be one of the main culprits responsible for plastic waste in the Nile.
The Nile provides Egypt with nearly 95% of its drinking and irrigation water. Yet the North African nation has been pouring loads of pollutants into the ancient river. In recent years, the government has been working hard to eliminate these sources of water pollution.
During the security void from 2011 to 2013, the Nile River has suffered from tremendous violations. Pollutants have been pouring in.